Good morning, and let's look at the Unit 3 test part 1. If you need to find this in your class plan, you can open up the drop box for class plan and go to today, November 15th. If you're coming any day after the 15th, just click on the 15th and it will show you everything due for the 15th. So here is the M version. We're going to click on that and it will open it up for you. Click again. Read over the instructions, continue quiz, or start quiz, depending on where you are in the process, and it will open the quiz for you. So what we're going to do is read through the passages and read the questions. Don't forget that if you need to stop or pause the recording, you absolutely can. You do only get one attempt at this the first time around. You will get another attempt next week after we've collected the data. But for now, you have one shot. So do your best on it, and that way you won't have to come back to it and do it all over again. Oops. Sorry about that. I was trying to adjust the screen. Okay, our first passage is called Music in the Brain, and questions 1 through 6 refer to this passage. From the beginning of recorded history, music has been created and enjoyed by people. Even early man carved flutes from bones. Thomas Jefferson was known to play his violin to help him formulate the most effective word choices as he wrote the Declaration of Independence. Albert Einstein, considered one of the most intelligent men who ever lived, also played the violin. He was said to have figured out his most challenging mathematical formulas by playing his violin. Today, scientists are discovering that the study of music, playing an instrument, or participating through singing can actually help develop our brains. No wonder Einstein and Jefferson, among many, found music helpful in problem solving. There was a time in American history when music was a centerpiece of family life. There were no televisions, radios, or other forms of electronic entertainment. Social life often involved someone playing the piano or other instrument, while guests sang along and listened for enjoyment. Therefore, if parents could afford the opportunity, their children were encouraged to learn how to play an instrument. Taking music lessons did not mean a child was expected to become a professional musician. However, it usually meant the kids learned the daily discipline of practice. Recent brain research has shown some surprising benefits as a result of formal musical training. Learning to play a musical instrument appears to develop parts of the brain that can even influence academic results. The studies indicate that the earlier a child begins training, the more benefits there are. One such study showed that children who began musical studies before the age of 7 had a more developed brain in the region where language production and auditory processing takes place. Scientists believe there is mounting evidence to show that early musical training can improve brain function. A research team from Northwestern University observed that to achieve the positive brain development from musical training, music students had to be active participants. There were differences found between the kids who attended a more passive music appreciation class and the ones who learned to play instruments. It was the active production of music that rewired the brain. Using electrodes on the students' heads, scientists were able to see how actively the brain responded when students generated music. Neuroscientists have suggested that playing an instrument, especially at an early age, can improve how the brain interprets sensory information. Music, singing or playing an instrument, also positively affects memory. Apparently, music activates both the right and left sides of the brain simultaneously, and this activity increases efficiency in processing information. In one study, researchers found the areas of the brain that affected language skill and executive function were more developed in musically trained students. The executive function is the planning center of your brain, where you figure out what must get done and how to do it in the time that exists. A special community music program in low-income areas of Los Angeles showed a higher success rate of students going on to college than students in the area who did not participate in the music education. A team of researchers was asked to offer scientific evidence for this compelling distinction. The study concluded that there were significant improvements in reading scores for the children who attended music classes regularly and were actively engaged for a period of 2 years compared to those who did not participate. Playing a musical instrument engages muscular movement, requires coordination, and employs various senses. This intricate process of making music creates motion and emotional response. According to one scientist's studies, intense musical training increases not only the volume of the brain, but also improves the connections between the hemispheres of the brain. Today there is a trend toward instrumental lessons being less of a priority than in decades past. In many cases, families cannot afford private lessons or the time it takes from the family schedule. Fortunately, many schools still provide classes for chorus, orchestra, and band, which help promote this educational opportunity. Families keep busy today with most parents working full-time outside of the home. Children are also busy with various extracurricular activities, competing forms of technological entertainment, and year-round sports activities. However, to achieve optimal brain development, scientists suggest that a well-rounded mix of musical and athletic training should accompany a student's academic education. As a student, consider the benefits of acquiring a musical skill. Find some music you love and an instrument you enjoy, and whether you learn at school or privately, apply some discipline to practice. The impact of musical learning can not only bring immediate opportunities for enjoyment, it can also improve brain function for a lifetime. Question 1. In paragraph 6, how does the author's statement that there were significant improvements in reading scores for the children who attended music classes regularly affect this passage? It shifts the tone of the passage from scholarly to personal. It helps establish the passage's reverent, reflective tone, or it helps establish the passage's reverent, reflective tone. Oh, those are exactly the same. Well, it tells you which one is the right one. Number 2, what do the words intricate process suggest in paragraph 7 of this passage? Creating music is not a simple task. Music cannot be understood as if it were science or math. It is possible to systematically create music. Question 3. How does paragraph 6 support the author's claim about music developing our brains? It proves that the more money that is spent on music education programs, the less money that is needed for remedial writing and reading programs. It provides convincing data about the academic performance of children who attend music classes. It defines the scientific terms used in the research studies that focused on the achievements of young people in the inner city. Again, just a reminder, please pause the recording if you need to. Go back to your course if you need to look at some of these paragraphs that are being referred to. And of course, pause if you need to take any other kind of break. Question number 4. How does paragraph 5 develop the idea that playing an instrument or singing can help develop the brain? It describes specific areas of the brain that benefit from learning to sing or play an instrument. It contrasts the effects of singing and the effects of learning to play an instrument, both of which affect different regions of the brain. It provides details of a research study on ways to improve executive function skills in young children. Question number 5. Which statement best conveys the central idea of the passage? It is important to listen to music while learning something new. Thomas Jefferson and Albert Einstein both benefited from playing musical instruments. Engaging with music has a positive influence on brain development. Question number 6. Which quotation from the passage best shapes the central idea identified in question 5? So you want to look at what you chose for question 5 and which one of these helps support that. Albert Einstein, considered one of the most intelligent men who ever lived, also played the violin. Playing a musical instrument engages muscular movement, requires coordination, and employs various senses. Learning to play a musical instrument appears to develop parts of the brain that can even influence academic skills. Question 7. Refer to explorations in literature for a complete version of this text. Which evidence from the text Lake Titicaca by Miguel Angel Asturias supports the inference that Lake Titicaca's waters must have special powers? If you need to, pause the recording, go back into content, go to class materials, and open up your textbook. So we are looking for which evidence from the text supports the inference that Lake Titicaca's waters must have special powers. Water in which the armor of the Incan Empire's conquistadors has not rusted, and it has been entombed already for centuries in its profound base. Mineral water, other American lakes have vegetable waters. The sun knows it, and it is not a heavenly body, but a foundry in the west. Waves of gigantic seamless mass from the Cretaceous that become, at the height of the American world, the fairest crown of water, Titicaca. Okay, so we're looking for an answer that shows there are special powers in the water. Number 8, refer again to your book for a complete version of the story. Reread this example of foreshadowing from About Russell by Rita Williams Garcia. In his way, Russell held his ground, but from some angry, inarticulate place deep within himself. Rosalind and I didn't know that his self-erected wall was how he protected himself. We just thought he was being a pain in the butt. Which statement best explains how the author's use of foreshadowing affects the story? It creates tension by showing that the author knew something was off about her brother from an early age but never tried to help him. It creates mystery by hinting at the idea that maybe Russell was not just being a pain in the butt, but was instead trying to cope. It creates suspense by indicating that Russell's ways of protecting himself might one day lead him to act violently or physically harm others. Question number 9. Refer to explorations in literature for a complete version of the narrative. Again, we are looking at About Russell. One theme of About Russell by Rita Williams Garcia is that family is always family. Which detail best explains how the author develops this theme over the course of the text? The author includes anecdotes about getting in trouble with her siblings. The author includes anecdotes about accepting her brother no matter what happens. The author includes anecdotes about her parents arguing and eventual divorce. Question 10. Which quotation from the text best supports the conclusion that Russell's family supports him as he is? Openly discussing Russell's illness and seeking help and information would be ideal, but it is not likely to happen within my family. Besides, my big brother helped me to paint my dorm room, gave me $20, and brought me a television set from home. Daddy, who worked in real estate, got Russell odd jobs cleaning houses newly listed on the market. Question 11. Read the poem. Questions 11 and 12 will refer to this poem. Wild Swans at Cool by William Butler Yeats. The trees are in their autumn beauty, the woodland paths are dry. Under the October twilight the water mirrors a still sky. Upon the brimming water among the stones are 59 swans. The 19th autumn has come upon me, since I first made my count. I saw before I had well finished, all suddenly mount and scatter, wheeling in great broken rings upon their clamorous wings. I have looked upon those brilliant creatures, and now my heart is sore. All's changed since I, hearing at twilight, first time on this shore, the bell beat of their wings above my head, trod with a lighter stead. Unwearied still, lover by lover, they paddle in the cold, companionable streams or climb the air, their hearts have not grown old. Passion or conquest wander where they will, attend upon them still. But now they drift on the still water, mysterious, beautiful, among what rushes they will build, by what lake's edge or pool, delight men's eyes when I awake some day to find they have flown away. Here's your question. How does the imagery in the poem's first stanza affect its tone? The image of the woods in August, the October twilight, the lake, and the floating swans combine to create a reflective tone. The tone of the first stanza is threatening, as if warning the reader that these natural beauties cannot last. The tone of the first stanza is youthful and exuberant, as if the speaker is a young person exploring the woods. Question 12. Which statement best describes how the tone in question 11 changes the poem's second stanza? The swan's departure, which symbolizes loss for the speaker, makes the tone of the poem more forlorn or mournful. The speaker of the poem envies the flying swans who can escape this small town. The speaker is inspired and energized by the swan's flight, so the tone becomes more forceful. Question 13. Read the passage. Questions 13 and 14 will refer to this passage. George Washington in the American Revolution. Main reasons for the American victory. The Americans win the war for independence against the strongest nation in the Western world. One big reason was geography. 3,000 miles of ocean was a daunting distance for British ships to transport a large army, keep it supplied, and bring in replacements as needed. The American rebels, in contrast, fought on their own land over a vast amount of space. The American victory also owed much to aid from other nations, especially the French, eager to revenge their defeat in the 7 Years' War. Without the money, troops, and naval support that the French provided, American independence might have become nothing more than a hoped-for mirage. Although American leaders made serious mistakes during the course of the Revolution, they rose to the challenge by doggedly staying the course. None were more steadfast than George Washington. Perhaps most important of all, however, was not the effort of any individual, but the spirit of the people, as many Americans dedicated themselves to the revolutionary effort. Yes, there were the sunshine patriots and summer soldiers that Thomas Paine scorned, as well as many Tories who remained loyal to Britain. In the end, however, there were enough Americans who regarded themselves as a separate people entitled to their own nation and were willing to fight and die for the cause of independence. Washington bids farewell to his troops. In November 1783, when Washington received word that the Treaty of Paris was signed, he began the process of saying goodbye to military life. His swan song was to be on November 2nd near Princeton, where he addressed his soldiers, whom he called one patriotic band of brothers. The time had come, said Washington, for him to bid them an affection and a long farewell. He told his men that creating a new self-governing country would not be easy. When the military battles had been long and hard, he said, they now faced the hard work of creating a free and self-governing nation. He urged his men to be virtuous and useful citizens, just as they had been virtuous and useful soldiers. The next month, Washington traveled to Annapolis, Maryland. There on December 23rd, he stood before the Continental Congress and formally resigned his military post. In his speech to his former colleagues, Washington spoke of the men in his army as his family. The speech moved his compatriots to tears. Washington was looking forward to a quiet retirement with his wife Martha at their plantation, Mount Vernon. Like so many Americans, he was uncertain what the future would hold, but hopeful that the young nation's best days were on the horizon. George Washington's final written order to his troops, released on November 2, 1783, reveals much about his character and his hopes for the new nation. In it, he bid a fond and emotional farewell to his band of brothers. He encouraged them to retire from the field of war to the field of agriculture. He would soon take his own advice. On December 24, 1783, immediately after resigning his commission before the Continental Congress meeting in Annapolis, Maryland, he rode like the wind in order to arrive at his beloved Mount Vernon in time for Christmas. Wow, that's like 3 hours in a car. And he did it in a day on horse. The American Cincinnatus. When George Washington resigned his military command, he earned a reputation as the American Cincinnatus. In ancient Rome, the general Cincinnatus was called from his farm to lead Roman troops in a time of peril. When the fighting ended, he could have ruled as emperor, but instead he chose to give up power and return to farm his land. He has come to stand as a model of service to country with no thought of personal ambition or power. A model that George Washington emulated. When King George III learned that Washington had turned in his sword and retired to Mount Vernon, in effect giving up the chance to be King of America, he declared that Washington must be the greatest man in the world. Question 12. Is it 12? No, it should be question 13. Read this sentence from the passage. His swan song was to be on November 2nd near Princeton, where he addressed his soldiers, whom he called one patriotic band of brothers. What is the best meaning of swan song? A final accomplishment or presentation before retirement, a tradition in which a general puts away his sword after victory, or a concert to celebrate their victory. Question 14. In the second paragraph of the passage, the author writes that Washington was hopeful that the young nation's best days were on the horizon. America would never reach its best days. America was like a ship sailing into the sunset. America's best days were still ahead. What they're asking here is, what does this mean? The young nation's best days were on the horizon. What is the meaning of that metaphor? Best days were on the horizon. Obviously, we don't have days on the horizon. So what does that mean in terms of America? Question 15. Read the passage, then study the image to compare it to the passage. Questions 15 through 16 refer to this passage. Excerpt from Don Quixote by Miguel de Cervantes, translated by John Ormsby. Don Quixote is the story of a man who, inspired by his books and by the tradition of chivalry, sets out across the Spanish countryside in search of adventure. Chapter 8. Of the good fortune which the valiant Don Quixote had in the terrible and undreamt of adventure of the windmills, with other occurrences worthy to be fitly recorded. At this point they came in sight of 40 windmills that are on plain, and as soon as Don Quixote saw them, he said to his squire, "Fortune is arranging matters for us better than we could have shaped our desires ourselves. For look there, French Sancho Panza, where 30 or more monstrous giants present themselves, all of whom I mean to engage in battle and slay, and with those whose spoils we shall begin to make our fortunes. For this righteous warfare, and it is God's good service to sweep so evil a breed from off the face of the earth." "What giants?" said Sancho Panza. "Those thou seest there," answered his master, "with the long arms, and some have them nearly 2 leagues long." "Look, your worship," said Sancho, "what we see there are not giants, but windmills, and what seem to be their arms are the sails that, turned by the wind, make the millstone go." "It is easy to see," replied Don Quixote, "that thou art not used to this business of adventures. Those are giants, and if thou art afraid, away with thee out of this, and betake thyself to prayer, while I engage them in fierce and unequal combat." So saying, he gave the spur to his steed, Rocinante, heedless of the cries of his squire Sancho sent after him, warned him that most certainly they were windmills and not giants he was going to attack. He, however, was so positive that they were giants that he neither heard the cries of Sancho nor perceived, near as he was, what they were, but made at them, shouting, "Fly not, cowards and vile beings, for a single knight attacks you." A slight breeze at this moment sprang up, and the great sails began to move, seeing which Don Quixote exclaimed, "Though ye flourish more arms than the giant Briareus, ye have to reckon with me." So saying, and commending himself with all his heart to his lady Dulcinea, imploring her to support him in such a peril, with lance in rest and covered by his buckler, he charged at Rocinate's full gallop, and fell upon the first mill that stood in front of him. But as he drove his lance point into the sail, the wind whirled it round with such force that it shivered the lance to pieces, sweeping with it horse and rider, who went rolling over on the plain in a sorry condition. Sancho hastened to his assistance as fast as his ass could go, and when he came up, found him unable to move. With such shock he had Rocinante fallen with him. Goodness, I can't believe that word's in there. "God bless me," said Sancho, "did I not tell your worship to mind what you were about? For they were only windmills, and no one could have made any mistake about it but one who had something of the same kind in his head." Okay, so that's the end of the passage. Here is the visual that goes along with it. Our Don Quixote. Here's your last question. Which statements are true about the windmill scene in both the excerpt and the image? It pokes fun at someone, it has political overtones, it includes opposing viewpoints. So look at this, think about the story. Guys, there he is riding his donkey with the broom in hand. I hope this one's obvious. When you're all done, review your answers, go to submit quiz. Now, in order to submit the quiz, you need to actually review. It's going to tell you if you have any unanswered questions, look it over, and then go all the way down and, can't see it, hit submit quiz down there. That's it, guys.